Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Laura. I am one of the parent consultants at Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. All of our consultants have children who have special needs or in special education. I am the transition coordinator, and I just want to welcome everybody to our Zoom tonight. We are going to be speaking about person-centered planning, and we have with us Claudia from CPAC. And Claudia, I'll let you introduce yourself, say a few words.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Provenzano. I'm with the Capital Region Education Council, or CREC. I'm a former special education teacher, now education specialist, and Charting the LifeCouse ambassador. I'm happy to be here with all of you tonight.
Wonderful. Just a few housekeeping messages. This is being recorded, and we will post it to our Zoom, our YouTube. So just be mindful of what you're talking about. If you have personal information, you may not want to share all of that. And we will get started. Okay, and feel free to ask questions at any time. So we want this to be relevant and answer all your questions in a timely manner. Okay, if not, you can always put it in chat as well. If you don't want to raise your hand, that's fine. Okay. And we do have interpretation, and here are the instructions for the interpretation. You do need to pick the globe at the bottom, which language. It should be on the bottom somewhere. Take it away, Claudia.
Okay, thank you very much. Like Laura said, please feel free to use the chat, raise your hand, or unmute yourself to ask any questions at any time throughout tonight's presentation. The more interactive we can be, the better for you. So please do not hesitate. All right, great. So we're here, as Laura said, we're here tonight to talk about person-centered planning, approaches for discovering what is important to a person, figuring out what opportunities may benefit them, and what accommodations or help could help that individual experience what is important to them in their future. So it's really talking about how to take a person's trajectory into what their good life would be. And that can really be anything and very individualized to each person. But that's really the basis of person understanding, of putting the person at the center and letting them really dictate opportunities and their needs and wants for the future.
Yeah, I really like it because it identifies their strengths, what's important to them, and really looks at like maybe what supports they need. And we'll get a little bit more into that further along.
And we like to say that person-centered planning is more like choosing an instrument than it is choosing a tool from the toolbox, because any instrument can make music. And so there are various types of person-centered planning, and they will all take you to person-centered planning. There are maps, there's path, there's charting the life course, and they'll all get you to figuring out what's important to a person in their planning for the future. It's not like choosing a toolbox where there's just one tool that will allow you to do what you need to do. So there isn't a right or wrong way to do person-centered planning. So it's important to remember that as you're choosing what the path that you would want to use for person-centered planning. It's really individualized, and there are many different ways to do this planning.
Agreed. And we'll talk a little bit about the different types in the next few slides. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share this video. And let's just make sure it works. I'm not great with technology, so just to warn you right now. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent, okay.
What is person-centered planning? Person-centered planning is a facilitated process that supports a person to achieve their dreams. The facilitator helps gather a group of people together who know the person and believe they can have and achieve their dream. The group celebrates the person's gifts, strengths, and talents. By identifying experiences and environments that help the person shine, the group creates trust that the person can make a contribution to their community. The facilitator acknowledges all voices in the group while asking probing questions to initiate a dialogue. This reaps rich information to help the team brainstorm ideas for the person. The facilitator then helps name the action steps to move the group to support the person achieving their dream. What are important features of person-centered planning? The process includes the following important values and elements. It focuses on an individual in a way that protects and preserves their dignity, is capacity-based with an emphasis on the person's gifts and talents, speaks to the person's dreams, uses a team process to solicit ideas and input from people who care about, are interested in, and support the person to achieve their dream, is intensely personal and honors the person's feelings and goals without judgment, is a process that responds respectfully and effectively to people of all cultures, classes, ethnic backgrounds, races, religions, and other diversity factors to affirm their worth as members of their community. Here's how we work with you. Our planning process is designed for people who want clearly identified goals and support to implement them. We do this by meeting with you, your family, and other
stop it there, Laura.
a few times to develop.
So similar to Laura, when we do person-centered planning, it really is a celebration. The person is the center of all of the attention, almost like a celebration, to talk about strengths, gifts, talents, and what is important to them. So it really is a fun process, and really is there to plan for whatever the dream is for that person in the future.
Yeah. How many person-centered planning meetings have you had, would you say? I'm putting her on the spot right now.
Sure, no, that's fine. I probably couldn't count how many throughout the year, but I would say I'm at about 7 for this school year. So since the beginning of September, about 7.
Great. That's a lot. That is a lot.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And like we said before, there are different types of person-centered planning options or frameworks out there. One is Renew, and that one is focused on individuals with significant needs. There is another called MAPS, and MAPS is used, person-centered planning is used for pivotal moments in a person's life. Big transitions like middle school to high school or high school to college, post-secondary, any type of post-secondary education, and moving forward into adult life. So the MAPS is often done at those really big moments of change. A PATH is a person-centered planning process, and what's unique about this one is that we start at the end and work backward. So the person talks about their dream first, and then we work backward to plan some steps on how they would get there, a little bit different than the other ones where we start at the beginning on some history of the person and then move forward toward the dream and an action plan. So just a little bit different. Circles is a person-centered planning process where we talk about what is important to the individual and who is important in their life, their immediate life, and then we go a little bit bigger into their larger circle of influence and then out to the community and kind of reach whom is important to that person within their circle of influence, like I said. And then lastly, charting the life course, we'll talk a lot more about this evening, so I won't dive too deep into that one.
Right. One thing that I wanted to say about Renew, and it's been used in my experience for many individuals who have behavioral and emotional health needs.
Absolutely.
And they really involve the community and do an individualized, like, school center planning with the community folks and wrapping around the system. And it's worked well for them.
So again, it's like picking a musical instrument. They will all make music. All of these will get you to an action plan for what is important for this person to reach their goals for the future. They're just all a little bit different.
Yep, I think it's important to meet the family where they're at, or the person where they're at, and use what makes sense.
Good point. So Charting the Life course is a framework. It came out of UMKC, and what it was designed for was to help individuals and families develop what a vision for their, good life or their best life would be, what they would need to get there, and how to really identify the supports that they would need to get there. And even just figuring out what they would like their lives to look like. What do they need to get their lives to be what they would like them to be? And sometimes individuals don't know, and the person-centered planning process is figuring out what that good life is. So there's a lot of different ways to go about that trajectory and figuring out where to go next, or just even explore what's next if they don't know.
Right. And sometimes it does help. I don't want these things for my life, and you can write that down, and that can be very helpful. And sometimes that's just where they start.
Absolutely. So it was created, again, for people and families of all ages and of all abilities. So there are some person-centered planning processes that are kind of lend themselves more to older individuals. But person-centered planning with Charting the Life course really can start at infancy, and it can go all the way up to aging, be planning for the aging process. So what is a little different about it is that it really does span the entire lifespan, and to explore all of the possibilities throughout the lifespan, to share hopes and dreams, and like Laura said, fears. It's important to know what we don't want, sometimes even more important to know what we don't want to get to what we do want. It's used a lot to set goals and high expectations for an individual, figure out how to really navigate how to reach those goals, to advocate for their own vision. And it's often used to problem solve and plan. It can be used for a certain topic to problem solve, such as transportation. If transportation seems to be a challenging barrier, we can use the Charting the Life course person-centered planning to problem solve in one certain area as well.
And just a little side note, I am currently using this process with my mother, who lives in another state, to plan for her future. She's not overly happy about it, but it has been useful to identify, what she wants and what she doesn't want, and what supports are available to her.
Yeah.
So it's been useful.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Laura, because I have a son who's a junior in high school who's starting to plan for college, and it's been extremely useful for him as well.
Scary time.
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
So here are the foundational principles of Charting the Life course, and it's shown here throughout this visual representation. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see all of the life stages that I explained just a few moments ago, all the way from infancy to elementary age individuals, up through middle school and high school, and then post-secondary education or transition programming, and then up through adults, and then finally aging. So you do see that black line, that trajectory, pointing up toward where a good life would be and a good life would look like. And again, it's really can be utilized through all of those life stages. When you see the trajectory and where it's pointing, you'll see around the outside of the circle, those are the areas of support that we look at throughout this person-centered planning process. What are the person's strengths and assets? What, if we were to ask people what they like and admire about an individual, those are all the things we talk about in supporting their personal strengths and assets. We also talk about relationship-based supports. Who in that person's family can help them get to where they want to be? We talk about eligibility-specific supports. So what supports is that person eligible for outside of their family? We talk about community-based supports and what supports are out there in the community in which an individual lives that can help support them. And then lastly, technology. So what types of technology? Is it assistive technology? Is it just simply using a calendar on a smartphone? But what kinds of technology supports will help that person as well? Moving toward the center of the circle here, we talk about the 3 buckets of support, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but they are connecting and networking, goods and services, and discovery and navigation. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Moving toward the center of the circle again, we talk about the life domains of Charting the Life course, and you'll see there that there are 6 domains in Charting the Life course, and we're going to get into those a little bit more specifically as well. But the last thing to really notice about this graphic and what really drives it home is that the individual is at the center. So we talk about all the foundational principles here, but what's really represented here is the person really being at the center of the entire process.
I see other questions in the chat.
Okay. Not yet. Okay.
No.
And the core belief or the mission of the Charting the Life course framework is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, learn, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. So we really talk about what options we have depending on what part of the state you are. In Connecticut, you may have different places in the community that you can gain access to for support. But it really is talking about every person, regardless of any barrier they may have and their family, to support what that good life really looks like. Okay. And oftentimes Laura and I as ambassadors get the question, who can help when using and Charting the Life course framework? And it really is everyone and anyone that is important to a person. When we sit down at person-centered planning meetings, oftentimes the individual is there, parents, other members of the family, educators, neighbors, peers. It's always nice when friends are there, the individual as well. Sometimes it's healthcare professionals, anyone in that person's life that can really give some great information and really help in planning for the process of that good life.
Yes.
But it can be, you'll see even employment specialists if the person is going out into the world and trying to gain employment. Employment specialists are another person that is highly attends meetings like this. Counselors and any other leader in the process of person-centered planning as well.
It's really anybody. So that's
anyone. Yeah.
Anyone.
There are no limits to who can attend the meetings and be part of the process.
Yeah. It is very interesting attending one of the meetings. A long time ago, I did a MAP session with someone I was supporting in this school district, and it was interesting because they involved everybody and really took their time. It's a facilitated meeting, and it took about an hour and a half. But it was nice to see what the individual wanted in getting those steps. Like, how can we support you? What steps do you need to take to get from point A to point B?
Right. Because it can be overwhelming, especially with MAPS and those pivotal moments in an individual's life. They are overwhelming. So it's amazing to hear from the individual, but it's also really great to hear from many different voices about what can be celebrated about the individual and how we can get them to where they want to be. Yeah. And it is about having different conversations than we may be used to having on a daily basis. It can be a different way of thinking. It can be about, we'll talk about supports and what an all green life looks like a little bit later on. But we don't want it to ever just be about the tool or about filling out a piece of paper or a program or a curriculum. Charting the Life Course really is not that. It really is a framework and a way of thinking. It's a way of having conversations. It's not, just about, you will see some quote unquote forms as we go through the presentation today, but it's not about filling them out. It's about having the conversations in which to get a person toward their good life.
Yep. There we go.
Okay. So like we said before, it really is to support individuals, but also their families as well. We want the individual to have self-determination. And what we mean by that is the ability to goal set for themselves, the ability to have time management, the ability to be able to organize themselves, the ability to understand why they are important, what is important to them, and include that in all parts of their life. And then the same with their families. We want to support families through person-centered planning in ways that maximize their strengths and their unique abilities to nurture and love the individual as well, and help them achieve their goals. So it's not just for the individual, but also for families as well.
Absolutely. I think we tend to forget sometimes that families do need support and tools to understand and to help the individual.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And I mentioned before when we looked at that graphic of the foundational principles, that one of the foundational principles of Charting the Life Course is the 3 buckets. So we want to make sure when we're planning that we have resources from each one of these 3 buckets. So not 1 and not 2, but making sure that we have all 3. And the first bucket is connecting and networking. We want to make sure that the individual and their family have access to people that have been in the situation that they're in before. So people that they can, that have been there before, they have been in their shoes, and they understand what's happening and what's going on. So we want to make sure that they have that connection of support to someone that, has gone through it already, or maybe going through it at the same time. So they have that network of connection. The second bucket would be support in discovery and navigation. So what information or what training do we need to give to the individual or the family in order for them to understand what person-centered planning is? A great example of that would be tonight, right? So we're giving you some information and some training about what person-centered planning is. So we want to make sure that they have access to the support to be able to discover even what they need and provide those resources for that. And then the last bucket or the last type of support is goods and services. So what does that person need in their day-to-day life? It can be medical support, could be support in their health, could be support in their finances, but in their everyday life, transportation is another good example. And so we want to make sure that we're filling each one of those buckets and making sure that supports come from each one of those areas. Okay. And here are the life domains, the 6 life domains that we talked about before. And again, we want to make sure that we have supports in each one of these parts. So daily life and employment. So that could be wherever that person is going in their daily life. It could be school, it could be a job, it could be somewhere else in the community. Are they volunteering? Are they going to transition programming where they're learning life skills? So what is that person, what supports do they need in their daily life? Where are they going to live? Again, remember that the part of the core belief is that a person should be able to live in their community. So how are we going to ensure that they have the appropriate housing in their community and access to all of the things in the community that they deserve to have? And we talk about social and spirituality. Do they have a network of friends? Do they have relationships with people that are important to them? Do they have the opportunity to partake in leisure activities that they want to? Whether that be, a faith community or a community of others, like-minded people in an area that they have interest in. We'll see an example of Ben a little bit later, and he loved, race cars and things like that, and working in the community at a firehouse. So does he have those, networks and the areas where he can really have those important relationships? Healthy living. Does a person have all of the support that they need to be able to live a healthy life? Whether it's nutrition and wellness, whether it's affordable health care, if it's behavioral intervention that they may need. So, and do they have all of those supports? Do they have supports and able to be able to live safely and secure, right? So do they know and have what they need in case of an emergency? Do they have support in knowing their legal rights, whether it be guardianship or some sort of support with that as well? And then lastly, advocacy and engagement. So we want to make sure that they're able to be self-determined, like we talked about before, have goal setting opportunities, have opportunities to be responsible, be a leader, be working with their peers, and really making those important decisions in their own life. So we want to make sure that we want to achieve outcomes in all of these life domains, and they do overlap and they are all connected, but we want to make sure that we are, again, just like we were filling the buckets, we want to make sure that all of our supports come from various areas. So we look at all parts of their life, not just school or not just a job, but we want to make sure that we are supporting and talking about and having those conversations about all of life domains. So the first two tools that we'll share with you today are, the top one is called the Life Trajectory, and the second one is called the Integrated Support Star. So we'll go into those a little deeper now. So here is the trajectory. And we mentioned before that sometimes it is as important or more important to talk to an individual about what they don't want, as well as talking about what they do want. So you'll see the top box is, what do you want your good life to look like? We can have that conversation with an individual and list hopefully in all of the life domains and filling all of the buckets, what do they want in their good life? And then below that, what they don't want. And we want to make sure that we're taking the steps, and you see the literal steps on the piece of paper, taking steps to get toward what the good life would be. And that you'll see the arrow pointing up, and that's the trajectory. We want to go toward the good life and away from the life that they do not want. And then we take those action plan steps that lead up the trajectory up toward what a person would want in their good life. So again, it's not about filling out this piece of paper that you will see in front of you. It's really about having the conversations of what does that good life look like and what does it not look like.
This is where, the steps that it takes to get them to where they want to go, that you might put into the IEP, into the individualized education program. is building those skills. So whatever it is that the person wants to do in their adult life, they still need skill building and supports, and that's what would go into the IEP.
Right. So when we talk about person-centered planning and we have these meetings, whether it be Charting the LifeCourse or MAPS or PATH or Renew, those are not legal meetings, but what comes out of the action plan and the action steps, like Laura said, are often things that do go into the IEP because they end up being like really important steps that need to be taken. So they can be weaved into goals and objectives or accommodations and modifications.
Renee,
Claudia, we have a question.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, sorry, Jen.
Go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. If you could talk to us a little bit about two things. One, if you have an individual, say, who's non-speaking, and you ask those questions, what do you want? What do you not want? With those guiding questions. Tips, tools for helping get to those boxes. And then would it be the family filling this out? Is it a school member? Is it everybody, listing what they think this individual wants or don't want? Could you just elaborate a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. That great questions, Renee. And the way that the tools are set up in the website that we'll show you is there are person-centered tools, and then there are family-centered tools. So there are some, this one here is person-centered. So it says, what do you want your good life to look like? And what do you want your, do you not want your good life to look like? The family-centered ones say something very similar to, what do you want your family member's good life to look like? So there are certain ways to go, but again, these really are for anyone, like we talked about before. So I do a lot of transition evaluations, and throughout that process, I use Charting the LifeCourse with the school team, the individual, and the family. And I take that information into account in the planning process. So really, they are for anyone and can be used for all of, and even more than that. But definitely, I've utilized those in all of those areas that you just mentioned to start planning, and they work really, really well.
Does that answer your question, Renee?
Thank you.
I think you had mentioned if the person can't speak, or is it somebody asking the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
So however an individual communicates is how they would communicate in a person-centered planning. So if it's a voice output or sign or a picture exchange communication, however a person communicates is how they would communicate in a person-centered planning session or meeting. And again, if with support from whomever in their whoever can support them, family, school team. But again, they would really participate in any way that they communicate at that given time.
We have another question.
Sure.
You can unmute.
Got it. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So I guess what I'm understanding is that because my child is nonverbal, right, and she uses an AAC. So there's a lot of there's a lot of support around family and friends, even SLPs from CCMC. How would they be able to be part of this whole transition meeting as well?
So anyone, and I always tell people when I'm facilitating one of these meetings that please invite anyone and everyone in any way that they can participate. So if it's an in-person meeting, sometimes we have people from CCMC zooming in for 20 minutes of a 3-hour meeting. Sometimes we have, it really is everyone and anyone that would be helpful in that planning process.
Okay. And if they're not able to make it, just, a letter of some sort and sharing.
Exactly. So sometimes I say, hey, if you can send me an email with, some thoughts that you have, we'll make sure that those are documented in the process. and shared with, typically at the end of a person-centered planning session, there is a written document that is, provided to everyone that was at the meeting. So if someone does email their input beforehand, I make sure that that's considered in that document that is completed at the end of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, Luce, do you have another question?
I do actually.
Okay.
How long do I have to be in touch with you guys for you to be able to be available to attend our PPT meeting around transitioning?
Okay, so it's important. I think, Laura, and do you want to go or do you want me to?
I think it depends on what are you asking for to attend the meeting, as to develop a person-centered plan, or?
So right now we have a PPT coming up down the road. And one of the things that, is going to be, I guess, introduced into our conversation, because she's 14, is the transition planning, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So is this a good time to invite, CPAC to be part of that meeting? And how much notice do you need in advance so that you are able to be available?
Before you answer that, Laura, can I say one quick thing? So it's important to understand that a transition PPT is a legal PPT, and it's very different than a person-centered planning meeting. They are two different things.
Good to know.
So yeah, so it's not. This isn't, again, these are typically not legal meetings like a PPT. These are separate from that. They can drive goals and objectives in a PPT for sure, but they're more informal meetings in that, you can invite anyone and everyone. Not that you can't invite anyone to a PPT, but they tend to be bigger, bigger group of people, and they tend to be a bit longer than a PPT process. But they are two separate things. But I'll let you, Laura, answer the question about how long you need. I just wanted to make sure that we understood that they were different.
Perfect, because I was going to explain that they are different. And sometimes during the PPT meeting, when they are talking about transition, they might say, let's get a person-centered plan together, and they would schedule whether, when they're doing transition assessments or something, that might schedule an assessment and a person-centered planning session and gather that information and then come back and discuss. So as far as CPAC, it depends on if we can attend the meetings and what the circumstances are. So it's probably best just to email me. We can set up a time to chat. And my email is at the bottom of the slides, but also we can throw it in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we definitely need some time to plan around that. Okay. You
do make a good point, Laura. Oftentimes recommendations come out of a PPT to have a person-centered planning session. And then the team with some other people also involved, then sit down and have a person-centered planning meeting. Absolutely.
Okay, so it just really goes into the PPT meeting to just say that, this is something that we want to consider for this individual.
Yeah.
And start planning from there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're very
welcome. Again, so I touched on this briefly, but we always want to make sure that the trajectory is pointing toward the outcome that we do want and away from things that we do not want.
And just really quickly, we're not going to go through every single video, but there are video links at the bottom of the slides that you can watch to help you understand.
And here is Ben that we were talking about before. The things that were very, very important to Ben in his good life were family, friends, tattoos, going on vacations, his girlfriend, and going to concerts and WWE, NASCAR, having his own money and job. He wanted to actually start his own business. He was part of the fire station. So he actually ended up attending a firehouse in his own community with his personal care assistant, and then actually ended up the firehouse, the people at the firehouse actually were the ones to initiate that he didn't really need anybody coming with him and that they could take care of that. So the people in the community could really give Ben everything that he needed, and he really didn't need his personal care assistant at that time. So that was just a great story. You'll hear Ben speak in a moment, and his mom. But he also has things that are important to him, like church, and he loves sports and good food, Pepsi and beer, and it's important for him to be active and stay healthy and fit. But things that in his that he knew he did not want in order to achieve his good life were being poor, having poor health or diabetes, or heart disease. He did not want a guardian at all. He didn't want to be isolated or segregated or live in an institution or a group home. And he didn't want to be treated differently than anyone else. So you can see as he started to, we started to have conversations then with his family and his support and care and school, that he started to tease out what his vision for a good life is. So I think we can hear from Ben, Laura, if you don't mind, down there.
No, we are going to. Escape here.
Develop a personalized plan.
The right one. It's not allowing me to go back. We might not be able to hear from Ben.
Okay, that's all right. They're linked in the. That's right. They're linked in the slides. Okay. You'll hear him talk about how important it is for him to, be part of the firehouse and be part of that community, and how important that is for him. And you'll see his mom sitting right beside him in the video, explaining how, it was important for her to support him to get there.
Okay.
That's my little synopsis.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And again, it's important to understand that it's not about, filling out a form, and that the person-centered planning tool can look very different. So you'll see here that this is just a different way of representing what's important to Ben. So you'll see here, there's pictures, which is really important when we talked about, someone, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but asked a question about someone who's nonverbal. Pictures are often included and can be included. And it's just a great way to represent, Ben's trajectory. So you'll see he's listed what's important to him, what his life goals are, and what bothers him. So again, you're getting at the same type of planning, but it doesn't look exactly like that trajectory sheet that you saw in the last slide. It can look very different. So don't be, locked in or married to one certain way that this form needs to look. It's really more about the conversation, and it can look many different ways. There aren't any limits to what that trajectory can look like. Yeah. And here's another example. And here is a different trajectory. And we still get to the vision for a good life and what an individual doesn't want. But we talk about how past experiences can kind of push that trajectory in one way and away from what they don't want, and talk about, real personal things that maybe have happened in a person's life to get them to understand what they want and don't want. So that's just a different type of trajectory as well.
Claudia, we have another question.
This perfect time for a question before we get to the next tool, the support star.
All right, go ahead, Luce.
How often would you recommend that when you start the transitioning planning in the meetings, how often would you say we should update this? Sometimes we have like PPTs that get updated every annual, but we know that we can call a PPT anytime. How do you treat this transition process as far as updating?
I always like to tell people that reevaluating yearly is really important, and I'll tell you why. Because especially now with the transition age being 14, that's a very young individual when you ask them what you want their good life to look like. And it's going to change a lot from, 14 to even 16 or 17, and then, 14 to age 20. And so I always say yearly is really a good best practice in updating these, because again, strengths and assets change, interests change. And, as a person grows and matures, we want to make sure that the plan is evolving with them. Very fluid process. And it's not a straight line. That trajectory is straight, but it really does kind of go like, zigzag. And so we want to make sure that we really are meeting the person where they're at that point in time. So I say yearly.
Okay, thank you.
That's usually my recommendation.
Person-centered planning should be, meetings should happen yearly. I know with the transition assessments and looking at different things for the student, it is done yearly or should be done yearly. And certainly a person-centered planning can be used also, but would you actually have a meeting and look at everything again every year?
Yeah, so what happens the first time is you have a longer meeting. Sometimes they can be 2 to 3 hour meetings. But then the next year when you come back, we typically call it like an update. And that meeting is a lot shorter because we don't have to go through the whole history, and we're just looking at things that may have changed since the last time we had a person-centered planning meeting. So those meetings are a little bit shorter. We call them updates. And so we say just, for an update, it doesn't take very long. But that initial meeting can be a longer meeting and a longer process.
Good.
There's another question in the chat about at what age do you start person-centered planning?
It can, as early as possible is the answer to that. And you see with Charting the Life course, like from infancy up through aging, I see it happening in schools a lot more at age 14 and beyond because of the transition age. And now we need to be, doing assessments, and person-centered planning can be part of that transition assessment process, and is in many IEPs. So I say the sooner the better, but I do see it much more common from 14 and on.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because it can be done at any life stage. And I know many younger students, younger individuals who have done that planning. What's going to happen in the next year? What's going to happen in 5 years?
Yeah.
And we have another question, sorry, about when reevaluating, should this be included in the IEP?
Usually goes in the transition assessment section for the current assessments in transition for that given year of that IEP.
Thank you. That's all that's in the chat.
Okay.
So if we don't have any more questions at this point, we'll go on to the second tool, which is called the Integrated Support Star. And when we look at the Integrated Support Star, again, the person, their photo, their name, however you want to document the individual, goes right in the center of that star, right in the center of the document or the plan. And we make sure that we think about all of the supports in all of those different areas. So how do they get support in their personal strengths and assets? Who are their relationship-based supports? Do they, what are their eligibility specific supports are they eligible for? How do they get support from community-based? And then what types of technology can support them? So we want to make sure, again, when we look at the integrated supports, that we don't have just, so many supports in that purple section, but we don't have any in the blue. Or you'll see Ben's example in a little while where all of his supports will eligibility specific supports. And then he didn't have any supports in any other area. And that's how he got into his community and the firehouse. So we'll see his example in a little bit, but we want to make sure that we have integrated supports and that they overlap and that they are coming from each of these parts of the support star. And here's an example of what kind of things when we have the conversations go into each one of those supports. So in their personal strengths and assets, like what skills do they have? What assets do they bring? What are they good at? What do they love? And then we talk about relationships, we talk about family, we talk about friends, we talk about acquaintances. So all people that are part of that person's life and circle. And eligibility, we talk about disability specific supports, but then also need-based supports that they could be eligible for. We talk about places in the community or groups that they can be involved in the community, or what government resources can be helpful for them too. And then technology. So we use the example, we talked a little bit before about an individual with an AAC device. So what kind of assistive technology would a person use? What kind of technology in the environment could they use? And then their own personal devices or technology that can be in their home or something that they take with them out of the home as well. And here are just a list of examples of integrated supports in each of those categories. So you'll see, again, personal strengths and assets, relationship, technology, community-based, and eligibility-specific supports. And they're just some examples that you can look at when you can see it a little better. I know it's hard to see here, that you can just kind of look at when you think about making sure that you have integrated supports and that they're not just coming from one of those columns, but that you have supports from all different areas of a person's life. And Laura knows this very well, that we worked very hard at the transition, the Connecticut Transition Task Force,
yes,
and in updating an integrated services and supports document that is Connecticut specific. So you'll have access to this document when you click on that link, and it will take you to services and supports that we have right here in our state under each one of those categories. Yep. So if you're thinking you have, a lot of technology-based supports, but you don't have a lot of community-based supports, you'll be able to look at that document and see what type of community supports can you help with for that individual, or what type of relationship-based supports can we start implementing for an individual. So it's a really great document. We worked really hard on that, and I think that you'll find a ton of resources there that will be helpful to you.
Definitely. And you can go in and they're all hyperlinked if you weren't looking at it. You can't really see it well, but it might be based on the community supports. And there's different links, and it takes you to that agency's website. Mm-hmm. It will be translated in Spanish soon. So,
and what I love about that document too is that it is broken down by age too. Mm-hmm. So you'll see like some preschool specific supports in elementary, and then up through high school and post-secondary as well. So it's broken down that way too, which is nice. And here's another example of Dylan and his integrated support star. So you see that he does designated that his personal strengths and assets are he's responsible, he's a hard worker, he self-advocates for himself, he's very resilient and doesn't give up. He has support from his mom, so that's an asset that he has, and he's very optimistic. And then in the purple section, he listed all the people that that help him and his relationship-based support. And then in the green section, what eligibility-specific supports can help him to get to his good life. And then the community-based supports in the purple section that help him, and the technology supports that help him in the pink section. So you'll see he's pretty balanced in his integrated, his star, and he does have supports from each of those sections. Okay, but then you'll see here, his star, besides his mom and his dad, his star was empty besides eligibility specific supports. So when we took those supports and we looked at a typical day or week in Ben's life, it was all green. So he was supported by a personal care assistant for most of the day from 9 to 4. And then those other parts of the days were kind of just left to his parents. And so what Ben's family did in his person-centered planning sessions was they really talked and really dove deep into How can we use technology to support Ben? How can we use the communities to support Ben? And how can we use his personal strengths and assets to support him? To make sure that when we looked at that star, it wasn't all green and purple. And when we looked at his calendar there, his weekly calendar, that it wasn't just green and purple. So throughout his person-centered planning process using Charting the Life course, you'll see, I think it's the next slide, Laura, that his star became much more well-rounded, and that he was able to identify that his personal strengths and assets were that he was able to stay home alone for an hour. So he really didn't need someone all day with him, because there were chunks of time that he could be home alone, and that he has the ability to use an iPad independently, right? So he did have personal strengths and assets that could help him throughout his day. He had technology that could help him. He had his iPad, and he had a digital watch that could help him with things when he was home. So he could set timers on his watch to make sure that he was getting to where he needed to be and doing the things that he needed to do at the right time. And then community-based supports, again, the firemen at the firehouse were able to be his support, and he didn't need his personal care assistant there. He didn't need, his family there helping him, but they were able to do it all on their own. And that he did have some other community-based supports at the high school, and he was able to take public transportation on his own. So he took a bus all on his own, and he really didn't need as many eligibility-specific supports throughout his day. So you'll see that throughout the person-centered planning process, he has supports in all of those areas, and then his daily or weekly schedule looks much different. It's not all green and purple anymore. There's supports from various other areas as well. So that was great to see throughout Ben's person-centered planning process too.
And just really quickly, so you talked about taking the bus, taking community transportation. So when a student is in high school, and if they're doing some job training and that's something they may need to learn, that could be a part of skill building and learning those steps. And you can incorporate those needs and concerns into the IEP. So that would be a way that this tool would translate to the IEP.
Yeah. Good example. Okay. So we have here some links to you to some specific Charting the Life course tools, like the one-page profile, some different examples of what a one-page profile would look like. And what a one-page profile is the trajectory and the star all on one page together. So it just has a different name. It's not called the trajectory, and it's not called the star. It's because those two tools are put together. And when we put them together, it's called a one-page profile, or the portfolio, Charting the Life course portfolio. So you'll see links to those documents on that slide, as well as the Spanish documents.
Yes. Yep. There's a bunch of Spanish documents. All of them are in a folder, and there's the link. And also, when you go to Charting the Life course, the actual website,
tools.com is the easiest way to get there.
Yeah, let me thumbs up. You can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so right now it's in English, but you can check. And everybody's face is over my screen, and if I move it, I might make you dizzy. So I'll just here we go, Spanish. There we go. So you can change it to Spanish, and
and all the documents are there.
Different, So you can navigate, the top to see what are the tools, what are the videos. Okay.
Questions about the trajectory or the star or anything we've talked about yet that weren't clarified or asked yet?
I have a question, Renee. Is there one in particular that you should start with? Should you do all of them all at once? Is there a preferred order?
It's a great question. I think doing them all at once would probably be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's hard to designate what to start with because person-centered planning is so individualized. So if if a person is really in need of supports in planning for their future, go to the STAR. If a person is really has this great grand vision and it's specific and they just want to know how to get there, start with the trajectory. It's, if you're just doing, if you don't really know where to start, I always say start with the portfolio because it'll open up those conversations. It's hard to say like what order because it's such a fluid process and it's such an individualized process that it's hard to kind of give a specific way in order to use the tools.
And so follow-up question to that, kind of thinking on what Luz was asking earlier, you're at your PBT and your team decides that, yes, this is a nice tool that we'd like to be using, and maybe they're not familiar with where to start or how to do it. Who decides, or how do you decide who will come in and help with that? Your agency does. Do they need to reach out to someone to bring them in?
That's a great question. So typically in person-centered planning, there is a facilitator. And sometimes a school district will have a facilitator that's been trained in person-centered planning, like right on site, and they'll facilitate the meeting. Or sometimes they call in someone like myself or Laura to be the facilitator. So that's, it's kind of up to, the agency, the school district, the transition program, wherever an individual is. If there's someone there that is, qualified to do that. Otherwise, you can let us know.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I play the video?
Jerry, my friend Buddy.
What's a good life for you?
Oh, driving morning car, listening my music to the loud studio.
Listening to music is my good life. My good life is being in my own house and having family and friends.
He's really quiet.
Good life is having your own home and working. That's my good life. What's a good life? What's a good life?
Driving my truck.
A good life for me is being with my friends. Since I have such good ones, they help me through hard times and good times as well. A good life is also for me just hanging around, taking a cool day off, being with my dogs, playing music since I play the cello as well. So. Good life is track and field.
What is a good life?
Family, pursuing, difficulty. I like coming here on poetry.
Having a good time, enjoy every day, and making the most of every moment.
A good life is a life filled with love and joy.
Playing to my parents, being what my parents and playing on the computer.
Good life is being with the people you love, feeling safe, being happy, doing what makes you happy. That's a good life to me.
A good life is fun and easy.
Good life is local in town.
Good life is good. So good life is playing hide and go seek with my sister Phoebe.
Can you tell me what is a good life?
Love, joy, and God.
A good life is having friends, Scooby, and everybody that cares about me.
Good life is art. Good life is bocce. Good life is sports. And good life is just being able to breathe.
A good life is when you don't die.
Right?
Right. What else do you like about life? What do you like to do?
I like to go do everything.
What are you doing today?
I'm going fishing.
Okay, what are you doing tomorrow?
I don't know what. Go to church.
Making good choices. That's what makes a good life.
A great life to me is having scoliosis.
A great life to me is traveling the country and making a difference. Great life is
Steven Seagal movies.
Great life is being with him.
You want me to do a serious one now, don't you?
I don't know.
Having a great life, having a strong family unit.
Absolutely.
And we put the emphasis on unit.
A great life is being with family, friends, and those that you care about.
And Triscuits.
And Triscuits.
A good life for me means lots of art and music and lots of activities and health and happiness and fitness and love and joy and hope and dreams.
With my parents and also with my friends at school.
I think he just had the biggest bag.
And with my dog.
I get out of my video.
Good life is.
Okay.
A lot of good examples there, though, and a lot of different ways in which the individuals were communicating, which, you know, I know that was a question that was brought up. So, you know, just some examples of that too.
Okay. And everybody see my screen? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is our contact information. And do we have any questions?
I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I just wanted to let everybody know I did drop the slides in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to launch a poll just to give us some feedback. If you can, that would be appreciated.